welcome in to the Roll Tide Rewind. The boys are back in session. We are here tonight to talk about a bracketology update. This is probably the last bracketology update before we do a video on Sunday, which will be Selection Sunday. But tonight we're going to go over if Alabama is a 3 seed, what they need to do to keep a 3 seed. We'll compare resumes tonight. We'll even go over a rooting guide for you to cheer for this week to ensure that Alabama gets a 3 seed. But before we start, how are y'all doing? Parker, start with you.
I'm doing great, living the dream in enemy territory here in the SEC, but, I just bleed crimson, so I'm always here ready to rep the Tide whenever I can.
How are you doing, Cole?
Fantastic. Also in enemy territory around the A&M and Texas fans, but hanging in there, having a great time watching this team. The last couple since I've been on the Roll Tide Rewind, it's been a really good run for Alabama. We've had some huge wins, so I'm excited to watch this team in March.
Some are saying when Cole came on the show, the tide turned.
That's a great point. Let's hope it doesn't turn back with this episode.
Yeah. Well, so first thing we'll look at is this is a bracket matrix. So this was updated yesterday, but Cole actually has an updated one for us, but not much has changed. But basically what this does, it combines a lot of brackets. I think 70 brackets is what we have here from all these bracketologists, and it averages where these teams are seed-wise. So you can see Duke, Michigan, Arizona on the 70 brackets. Everyone had them as a 1 seed. But we're looking at specifically at Alabama, and you're going to see here, I'll move the mouse so everybody can see. We are the last 3 seed. We are the number 12 overall seed. Right now we're averaging around 3.6, which puts us at the 12, right ahead of Gonzaga. So which is crazy because, a few weeks ago, maybe even 3-4 weeks ago, we were projected as a 5, maybe a 6 seed, but then an 8-game win streak, including a win at Tennessee. We have 3 really great road wins at Tennessee, at St. John's, at Illinois. We'll go over resumes in a second. But on the surface, how do y'all boys assess the last few weeks and how we're almost to that 3 seed line? I'll go with you, Parker.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was something that was going to be on the table for Alabama. I mean, Cole and I were at the OU-Alabama game, and I just remember looking over to Cole and thinking, this is a team that's incredibly streaky, and that's not something that you want heading into March. You want a team that's consistent, that's doing all the right things. I didn't think that we had it in us, to be perfectly honest with you. Since that point, taking on the chin at Tennessee, taking on the chin at Florida, going on that huge run, I feel like there was a lot of character growth since that point, because I do feel like that was like the 2nd or 3rd game in a row where we got to the point where it's like, oh, crap, we're down 15 again. And the boys are like, I'm so dadgum sick of having to come back up 17 just to go into overtime. Now, we've seen a few overtime games, but I have liked the consistency more. Even if it is still streaky at times, it hasn't been just this on or off from the offense that we really got a taste of about midway through the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it at the top, but the last month or so of this team has been huge. I think I point to specifically the win at Tennessee and the win at home against Arkansas as the big maybe turning point. Maybe Arkansas is the turning point and Tennessee is what solidified it to me. But I think this team is a lot better right now than they were, as Parker mentioned, kind of at the beginning of SEC play. I'm very excited to see what they can do in March. They picked up some huge wins over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a very great turnaround. 8-game win streak. You lose at Georgia. It was, Catchings had 31 points. And Georgia has been shooting well as a recent. So, yeah, I think they just caught us at a bad time. But it's also still a quad 1 loss. It's not the end of the world to lose to Georgia. They won 22 games this year.
Tough sandwich spot, too, in between Tennessee and Auburn. That's always going to be a tough game to get up for, I think.
Especially it being also a Tuesday game instead of a Wednesday game, too, I feel like as well. But what we're going to talk about mostly today is there's a crowded 3-4 seed line. Kerry Miller and Graham Doran of Unnamed Bracketology have joined us for a few times, and they're a great channel to follow. They go over bracketology almost every single day from January to March. But they talked about a problem right now for the committee is that there are realistically 8 teams that really should be a 3 seed, but you can only pick 4. So we're going to go over to an Excel spreadsheet, and boom, Excel spreadsheet here. So on this Excel spreadsheet, sorry if you can't see it very well, but basically we have teams. We have Alabama, Iowa State, Kansas, Texas Tech, Purdue, Nebraska, Virginia, Gonzaga, and then the 3 other SEC teams, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Vandy. We have the WAB, which is wins above bubble, net ranking, Ken Palm strength of schedule, the quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4, and then their best wins and their worst losses of these teams. So to start off with Alabama, your one thing Alabama has going for them, their WOB is incredible. It's 7.48 out of these teams. It is the second best. And wins above bubble, for people that don't know, it's basically saying if a bubble team had your schedule, how many more wins are you getting than the average bubble team? Alabama's at 7.48. It also is a testament to how strong Alabama's schedule is. KenPom strength of schedule is first in the country. Kansas is not far behind at third, but you can see there at some of these teams like Gonzaga 88th, Virginia 74th. That's where Alabama gets them. KenPom metric though, Alabama's at 15th, whereas Purdue is 8th, Nebraska 12th, Gonzaga 10th. Like they're a little bit ahead. And then you also have net rankings are kind of the same. Alabama does have a lot of quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities. They have had 24 of them, winning 16 of those. And out of these teams, the next closest is Iowa State with 16 wins. Vandy also has 16. And then quad 3 and 4, Alabama doesn't do much of their damage there because they really didn't get to play anybody. Whereas Gonzaga has played, I think that's 19 games against quad 3 and quad 4, even losing to Portland, which is a really bad loss. For Alabama, also, one thing that's good is they have 3 good wins away from home. Illinois on a neutral site, in Chicago, basically a road game. At St. John's, at Tennessee, those are all tournament teams, top 5, 6 seeds, and also a win at home against Arkansas. So I think a big thing is right now, I personally believe Iowa State and Nebraska have solidified a 3. I don't think we're passing them. It comes to, do you think it's Virginia? Do you think it's Alabama, Texas Tech, Kansas, and there's Purdue, and then Gonzaga. Yeah, Gonzaga is the other one I mentioned. Arkansas, Tennessee, and Vandy. I don't think they're getting to a 3. I think Arkansas and Vandy may. Tennessee, I don't think they are unless they get a run in the tournament. Tennessee has kind of fallen off. Like you see their wins above bubble there is 4.23. It's the lowest of the bunch. And they're 5-9 against quad 1 opponents. So I think Tennessee is out basically of this running here. But you have between Alabama, you have Kansas, Texas Tech, Purdue, Virginia, and Gonzaga. So you have 2 spots to give to those teams. For y'all, what helps Alabama's case the most to be a 3 seed at this moment over those other teams? I'll start with you, Cole.
Yeah, for me, it's, you mentioned it, but it's the wins above bubble, the WOB, if you will. So all the bracketologists that I've listened to and seen their updates, they've talked about how big WOB is going to be this year. It's been a focus of the committee. They started using it, I think, for the first time last year, but everybody's saying that's going to be a much bigger focus because unlike the quadrant systems where you can't really distinguish between a quad 1A victory versus a quad 1B victory, where a lot of wins are treated the same when they really shouldn't be. Every win is specific in wins above bubble, which I think is huge. And so because of that, I think the NCAA is going to focus on that heavily. So in terms of that, obviously Alabama in a really, really good spot there, the second highest on this list, only barely behind Nebraska. Now the question is, are they actually going to practice what they preach, right? You never know if they're saying that and they're actually going to follow through with it. Who knows? They obviously didn't really follow through on it in the top 16 reveal when Alabama wasn't included. So we'll see if they continue to do that. But looking at these numbers, the wins above bubble, I think is the biggest thing that may potentially cement Alabama on that 3 line.
That's a great point, and I do think you're right, Cole. I think that is going to be the primary focus. And then what do you turn to? You turn to the other auxiliary factors. You say wins. I think losses are going to be huge because when you look at this, especially this crop that's right in the middle, you have to nitpick and you have to get really nitty and gritty. And the losses are a really good example of that. Some of these losses for some of these top teams are inexcusable. The biggest one, of course, being Gonzaga at Portland. Like that one is just going to be the backbreaker, I think. And I don't think that whenever you compare head to head, okay, the wins and the strength of schedules, the KenPom, all of it, you factor all of it in. That's the tiebreaker right there because as we saw in the previous chart, Gonzaga is trending 1/10 of a point behind Alabama in average seeding ranking, so to speak. There's kind of a gap between those first 3 in seed 3 and then the 4th one. And that's really what we're all fighting for. That's the crumb that we're all trying to get, so to speak. I think that it will come down to the nitty-gritty. So the losses are going to be huge. Obviously, we talked about it, the loss at Georgia, the Texas by far being our worst loss, as you see there on the sheet. I think that it helps that all of those are in conference play. I think that Iowa State also has that same sort of thing going for them, like the Texas Tech, Iowa State sort of partnership going on there. That is a benefit to them that they are all in conference play, because you do see those teams multiple times throughout the year, and it is so hard to beat a team twice, especially at this level in D1 basketball. So I think losses are going to be very important. Definitely something to keep an eye on how the committee evaluates those comparative to all the other factors.
No, that's a really good point. On this next graphic we will do, we're going to look at these a little more like it's a little smaller so you can see it a little bit better, but it's also like it has positives and negatives to each of the teams. So I'm going to go to this graphic now. So in this graphic here, it goes into these 6 teams a little more specifically. So for Virginia, they're 27-4. It's a great record. Your top 10 in all resume metrics, your sits in 3 versus quad 1. You have a good WOB at like I think 6.93. But you also have no wins versus the top 5 seeds. Alabama, if you look at like the top 5 seeds, let me just I can go back a little bit. Let me go back to this one right here. Alabama has, just by looking at this, they played Arizona, they've played Florida, they've beat Illinois, they've played Purdue, they played Gonzaga, they've played Vanderbilt, they've played Arkansas, they've beaten St. John's, they also beat Arkansas too. You can just look at the top 5 seeds and just go boom, boom, boom. Alabama played all these teams. Virginia has not. Virginia has a bad strength of schedule. We're in the 70s, whereas Alabama is number 1. That's where it helps Alabama. For Texas Tech, has great wins. You win at Arizona, you beat Iowa State, you also beat Duke on a neutral site, and you beat Houston. I don't think anyone has a better group of wins than that right there. The problem, you're 20th in strength of record, you're 12-9 versus quad 1s and 2. You also lost JT Toppin. That's the biggest loss here, in my personal opinion. Now, the committee said on their first reveal rankings that the reason Texas Tech was 13 overall, even after JT was hurt, they said they were a 3 seed. Then when he got hurt, they dropped him to a 4. So that's also something to look at. However, they have beaten Iowa State since he got hurt. They did just lose to BYU, and also BYU doesn't have Richie Saunders. So that's also another thing to consider with that loss as well. Purdue, you're 11-3 away from home. You beat Texas Tech, Alabama, and Nebraska. So teams that are fighting for that chance, you also beat them. However, Purdue has been struggling recently. 5 home losses, 4 of them to top 10 opponents that you couldn't finish. They lost to Michigan State at home, lost to Michigan at home, lost to Illinois at home, and they just recently lost to Wisconsin at home. And they also barely avoided a bad loss to Northwestern. If they would have lost to Northwestern, I don't know if we'd be having the conversation right now. Kansas, like Alabama, has a great strength of schedule. Only Duke, Michigan, Arizona match the quad 1A wins. However, Kansas has also struggled a little bit recently. They have picked up some losses to Arizona State. They also lost to Cincinnati. Gonzaga, you're good against quad 1, but you haven't played many of them. You're playing 20 quad 3 and 4 games, lost to Portland. Your best road win is Santa Clara, which is not a bad win. You also beat Alabama, though. That's Gonzaga and Purdue's thing, is they did beat Alabama. For Alabama, like we mentioned, they have great wins: Illinois, St. John's, Tennessee. You are 1-4 versus the top 4 seeds and 0-2 versus Purdue and Gonzaga. So based on this, you have to pick 2 of them. Alabama is getting a lot of favorable love lately. What do y'all, out of this graphic, what stands out the most to you about these teams? I'll start with you, Parker.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The biggest thing to me is, if you look at this graphic, I think the strongest contender, in all honesty, is Purdue, because the committee doesn't value home losses whenever you talk about a tournament setting, whether it be the Big Ten tournament, whether it be the group of 64. Obviously, it plays into it somewhat, but these teams aren't playing at home come March. They are on the road, and to have that sort of road warrior mentality definitely shines through. So I think Purdue is actually in a sneaky spot right now. We're going to talk about the conference play a little bit more, and I'm going to kind of jump the gun. This is something I kind of alluded to in the previous segment. Playing these teams multiple times, whether it be Kansas, Texas Tech, Alabama, these teams in these conference tournaments that you're going to have that second chance to get against, it's going to matter more this tournament than I think it has in the last 4 or 5 years, these second chance games, because the trends are everything right here. If you're riding the ship and you're doing things the right way and you're peaking at the right time, that absolutely plays a part in the selection committee. Here's the thing, though. None of these teams but Alabama are starting to peak at the right time. whether it be injury, whether it be momentum. Alabama clearly showing in this last quarter of the season, last third of the season, hey, 8-win streak, we dropped one on a random Tuesday night. Okay, it happens, right? Conference game. But they are on that hot streak. So I think the two coming out for me are Purdue and Alabama. Obviously, if Gonzaga wins their conference championship, it's a discussion. But in terms of who has the most to gain and who stands at the top when the dust all settles, I think it is Purdue and Alabama.
Yeah, I'll agree on Purdue, and I agree. I think the last spot at this point is probably between Alabama and Gonzaga, and I think less so than it depending on Gonzaga winning their tournament, which I think they probably will. They'll be the heavy favorite to do so. I think it more depends on how Alabama fares in our tournament. We're going to have multiple opportunities for quadrant one wins that Gonzaga will not have, and I think that's important. The other thing I want to point out at this spot, I think the losses to Purdue and Gonzaga for Alabama could be a deciding factor, unfortunately, against us. I worry if we're neck and neck with either of those teams, I think that could be an easy way to fall to one of the other teams than us. So that's a big thing to me. The other thing I want to point out here is that the committee likes to say that they pay attention to all these games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. A lot of times it doesn't seem like they do. So while Alabama could pick up some big quadrant one wins here, I'm worried the committee won't weight them as heavily as they say they will. A lot of times you see the Sunday results almost always get thrown out. Even sometimes the Saturday results don't seem to really impact seeding very much. So just one little disclaimer I wanted to put in this part.
No, I think you definitely saw that like a few years ago. I think it was when Brandon Miller was on Alabama. Purdue won the Big Ten tournament. Houston lost the AAC tournament, and Purdue and Houston really were neck and neck, and they gave Houston the edge over Purdue. Then Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. Not saying they needed that switch, but I just wanted to put that out there that one little thing led to a big upset. So
speak your truth, Thomas. Speak your truth.
I'm telling you, I'm just talking, man. Graham Doran has put out a projected bracket. Like I said, follow Unnamed Bracketology. Love looking at their content. This segment is sponsored by Cole. Cole, as in Cole here, not Coles, but Cole is going to ask. I'm going to ask a few questions, and Cole has done his research for this. Parker has also done his research too. We'll knock it to him as well. But Cole is looked at the 13 and the 14 seeds that Alabama could potentially play. So I had this here so you can see like a list of like potential 13, potential 14s. These are also subject to change because if they lose in their conference tournament, they also may not be the team representing here. But Cole, what 13 or 14 seed if Alabama is a 3 seed, they would play a 14 seed in the first round. If they're a 4 seed, they would play a 13 seed in the first round. Which ones should we want to avoid? Who we want to play? What are your thoughts here?
Sure, Thomas. So yeah, so you mentioned it. A lot of these spots are not locked up, right? So I'm looking at the 13 line. Not a single one of these teams has won their conference tournament officially. So none of these teams could be in when it's all said and done. So what I wanted to do to start with is put together like a profile of a team that you don't necessarily want to play in March. It's like a 13 or a 14 seed, as you mentioned. And then I'm going to give a couple of examples of some teams that I think do kind of fit in that territory and some that I don't think and that might be good matchups for Alabama or really any other 4-3 seed that you see. So the big thing that scares me against a mid-major team that's on the 13 or 14 line is a team that shoots a lot of threes because that's the highest variance teams, right? So the more threes you shoot, you never know how a team's going to shoot. They could come out and shoot 60% from three, and if that happens, you could be in trouble no matter if you dominate the rest of the game. So three-point variance is the biggest thing. Another thing I do not want to see in a team I want to play is a coach that has experience in March, both in winning conference tournaments as well as potentially winning games in the NCAA tournament. And then a couple of more Alabama-specific teams some Alabama-specific profile things that could bother us. I don't really want to play a slow team. I'd like to play a faster team because I think we can we're more comfortable, obviously, in a fast-paced game. Also, slow games limit the amount of possessions in a game, which can also increase variance. It's not what you want to see in a 4 versus 13 matchup potentially. And then last, I'd love to play a team who they like to play through the post. Because I think a lot of those teams that play through the post, they're used to being able to win that way against other mid-major teams that may not have the size that a lot of these teams have. They haven't seen a guy like Aiden Sherrill. So those are the big things. that I personally want to see do not want to see in a matchup for Alabama. I put together a couple teams that I would like to play. For those, I mentioned Utah Valley, East Tennessee State, who might be losing right now as we record this, so that we may not have to worry about them. North Dakota State and Portland State are kind of the teams that I would really like to see that are currently projected to be in as per bracket matrix. Some scary teams for me. Whoever wins this Troy versus Georgia Southern championship game, and by the way, shout out Charlie Henry, former Alabama assistant. At Georgia Southern, they won 5 games in 5 days, playing in the conference championship right now.
That's crazy.
Good for him.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But don't want to play them or Troy, teams that take a lot of threes. Northern Iowa, another team that takes a lot of threes, plays very slow, got a really good coach. Hofstra, Liberty, and High Point are the last 3 teams. All teams with really good guard play, really good shooting teams, and they have guards that really scare me. So those are the teams I put together. I'm interested to hear you guys' thoughts, not maybe either on teams that you're wanting to avoid or potentially like matchups that could trouble Alabama.
I'm so glad that you said High Point because I think that they are a criminally underrated team. I would not want to be up against them. I think they're like 4th or 5th in Division I in turnover differential. They have like 500 forced turnovers versus 300 turnovers. Big South champions. And you're right, the experience, the 6th man that was at Florida and Xavier and all these other big names and has the experience playing in the SEC and these other really hard divisions. That's the one team that I do not want to be matched up against. I don't think that they're going to fall past that 12 seed. I don't really think it's going to be on the table. But, that's a round of 32 team. If we're looking at this bracket right here on our screen, not that it's going to stick, but do you want to play them in the round of 32? Cool. I don't. That's a matchup I wouldn't look forward to. So Cole's right. It's these sneaky teams that can get really hot. Experienced guard play is something too, and then just physicality, big forwards that can move pretty quickly. Whether or not they're offensively talented, but just can clog the lanes and can get to the basket and really guard it defensively. I think that could really clog us up if they turn it into a low-scoring affair.
Yeah, and good thing you mentioned about the low scoring versus high scoring, because when we played Charleston 2 years ago, like Charleston runs fast and they wanted to outpace us, and you're not going to outpace Mark Sears, Latrell Wrightsell, Rylan Griffin. You ain't going to outpace those guys. And then the next game we played Grand Canyon, and they were like the 5th slowest team in Division I, and it showed. They got to the free throw line. That game slowed very, very down. And that was probably the most nervous I was during that Final Four run, was the Grand Canyon game, which is crazy because we played a 1 seed North Carolina and also played in the Elite 8 game. But that was probably the most nervous I got for losing a game. But speaking of which, second round games, how they can be nerve-wracking. If we're the 3 seed, we're probably playing a 6 seed. If we're a 4 seed, probably playing a 5 seed. What it's looking like right now, because the 5 line is getting crowded by a lot of SEC teams, they're going to try to avoid a rematch. So usually the 5 seed they pair with Alabama is North Carolina. Or if we're the 3 seed, we have more opportunities for these 6 seeds like BYU, Wisconsin, Louisville. What do you want to avoid in the second round, Cole? And then also give us your list of teams, just like you did this last time, if you haven't.
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest thing that I want to avoid in a 5 or a 6 seed in the second round is I want to avoid NBA level athletes. Those always scare you in March Madness. A guy that can take over a game, really wreck it for you almost single-handedly. We saw it with Darius Acuff a couple weeks ago at Arkansas. Alabama was able to pull that game out, but not for lack of trying. Darius Acuff was incredible in that game. Almost beat us basically single-handedly in that game. The other thing that I want to particularly mention with this tournament is that I want to avoid a team that's healthy, if possible. We've mentioned it with a lot of these teams, but Texas Tech, North Carolina are the biggest ones for me, where they've lost a key player, probably their best player. That could be a potential matchup to exploit there. A couple other things that I want to avoid in this potential game: interior defense, rebounding, and three-point defense. We want to play teams because we like to shoot at the rim or shoot threes. We'd like to have teams that aren't as strong defending those areas, and then rebounding is a way that can kill us. I think back to the Purdue game early in the season where it felt like we couldn't get a rebound the entire game. So in terms of teams we may want to play that kind of don't have a lot of these qualities, Vandy is the first one I mentioned, but like you mentioned, Thomas, they may try to avoid that if at all possible. Texas Tech, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and St. Mary's. Texas Tech and North Carolina, I mentioned it, missing their best player. I think that would be a good matchup as we see here. Wisconsin and St. Mary's, I think athlete level is going to be a lot lower than what we see with Alabama. I think LeBaron and Aiden are going to be able to kind of have their way with those guards.
I mean, not to interrupt, you saw it last year against St. Mary's. You saw it last year. Yeah, 100%. So
yeah, and then teams I don't want to play. Arkansas, I put both Arkansas and Tennessee on here. Again, same thing. They're probably going to try to avoid that matchup, but sometimes they can't help it. They have to. But neither of those teams are teams I necessarily would want to play. And then St. John's, who I know we already beat, but I think they're playing a lot better. And they have NBA level size. They have really, really good interior defenders that scare me, as well as Louisville, who's a team who could just get hot on any given day. Those are the teams that I kind of would like to avoid.
Yeah, St. John's scares me. I think is just a trap game in disguise. And I think the casual fan might say, "Oh, we've beat them once, St. John's. Who's St. John's? We're just going to beat them again." No, that's one that I'm actively trying to avoid. I think that we've kind of missed the elephant in the room here. I don't think I can add to anything Cole has said, so I'm going to say this. And the big reason why Alabama wants that 3 seed is because of how generationally strong the 1 seeds are this year. We haven't brought it up yet. Duke, Florida, Michigan, Arizona, the teams at the top of your screen right now, a historic run that would probably be number 1 overall seeds any given year in the last decade, with a handful of exceptions. That's how good they all are this year. We're aiming for that 3 spot so we can get on the other side, so we have the opportunities to take on that 6, 7 seed or even a 2 seed that we've already beat 1, potentially. A chance that some others would be nice, but that is really the goal here. If we get caught on the top side of the bracket, okay, it happens. It's going to be such an uphill battle to get to that, the Midwest champion or the South champion, whatever it may be, to get to that spot. We really are pulling for that 3 seed, and I think this is the perfect segue. How do we get there, Thomas? Who should we be pulling for this weekend?
It's a good point. So here's the thing with these 1 seeds. Duke, Michigan, Arizona, lock them up. They're 1 seeds. Florida, potentially if they lose, they would not be a 1 seed, and like UConn may take them back, but I'm going to go with Florida. Those are the 4 best teams in the country. I think last year they got it right. The 4 1 seeds last year were the 4 best teams entering. They all made the Final Four. I think we're kind of seeing a similar trend here with these 4 teams. What you want for Alabama, you want them to be the 3 seed, like Parker said, and we want to play a 2 seed first, because realistically, just look at the 1 seed line, look at the 2 seed line. What scares you about the 2 seed line? Is it Illinois? Yeah, they've gotten hot recently. The good news is Alabama has beaten them already. Does UConn scare you? No. They just lost to Marquette. Marquette's won 12 games. Does Houston scare you? They played a tough schedule, and Houston is always Houston, but they've had games where they've struggled on offense. Michigan State, honestly, might be the 2 seed I would want to avoid. But Cole, you did some digging. What 1 seeds should we, if we are paired if we're got to play a 1 seed no matter what. If we want to make it there, we have to maybe play a 1 seed. What 1 seed do you want us to pair with, and what 2 seed do you prefer to?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Look at these 1 seeds. I keep looking at each of them. I'm like, man, I don't want to play them. Man, I don't want to play them. Man, I don't want to play them. Like you said, Parker,
I'll say one I for sure do not want to play. I do not want to. Well, let me back up. Duke has injuries to Caleb Foster. They have multiple injuries to good players. If those guys are affected and they can't play to their strength, I may want to play Duke. However, I don't want to play Cam Boozer. I think he would annihilate our front court. I love Aiden Sherrill, but Cam Boozer would annihilate the front court. Michigan, even though I think Michigan might be the best team, they could be the answer here. I think they've had games where they've struggled and they've been able to sneak out of them with Laxell Lindenborg, Elliot Cadeau, and then also them losing their backup point guard to injury has forced Cadeau to play more minutes recently. I think that could be potential, but I'll let you finish, Cole. I just had to get my thoughts out.
No, I agree. It was, for me, it's between those 2 games, and I think maybe more than anything, neither of those teams have guards that I would necessarily consider elite. That's something I'm always trying to avoid when I'm playing a top team. That always scares me. That's one thing. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is that honestly, it's the uncertainty. We've played Florida. It went really poorly. We've played Arizona. It went really poorly. Neither of those teams I'd like to play again. I don't necessarily think I see it flipping the other way if we were to play them again, unless we were to get really, really hot from 3. So I think I'd rather take my chances with the unknown of Duke or Michigan.
So like Parker said, this is a good segue. What should we root for this weekend? So Alabama is a projected three seed, 4 seed. You want that 3 seed. It's very important. What does Alabama have to do? Here's the SEC tournament bracket. Alabama's going to open up on Friday, either against probably Georgia or Texas, 2 teams that Alabama actually already lost to. So revenge factor there. If you win that, you're probably playing Arkansas. If you win that, you're probably playing Florida. So as an Alabama fan, let's go over a rooting guide. We're going to create a rooting guide for this week. What do you need to root for? First thing you need to root for, what you can control, which is Alabama. You want to make it to Sunday. I think making it to Sunday is very, very important. If you make it to Sunday, that's a win over, say it's Georgia. That's a quad 1 game. Win against Arkansas, that's a quad 1 win. That's 2 quad 1 wins. That puts us at 10 quad 1 wins. That probably bumps our WAB up to over 8. And that makes your resume ironclad, in my personal opinion. That makes that ironclad. I know I talked to some of the bracketologists, and they said that doesn't solidify a 3 seed. I think it almost does. Winning those 2 games, I think, gets you to the point of that's almost an ironclad solidified. I also added in
this. I'll add this too, just to jump in right quick.
Yeah, of course.
It also guarantees you, at minimum, a loss in the conference finals. So if Gonzaga runs the ship, and Gonzaga seems to be, right there behind us in terms of average ranking, you are 1 game behind them in terms of conference rating. If you get bumped against Georgia or Texas, that's tough. But if you lose in the conference finals, then okay, you made it to the final game, right? You may have lost it, but you did get to that point, and you do have those wins under your belt. I do think that looks much better in the eye of a committee member than just, okay, some quad 1 wins. No, you got to the conference finals, and you couldn't get it done there against, in this case, it's probably Florida, and it's, another loss to Florida. But Florida's will lock up a 1 seed if that were the case.
Yeah, and then I added this last point for Tennessee to beat Vanderbilt. Basically, Vanderbilt not make it to Sunday. This is an outside chance. I think Alabama is ahead of Vanderbilt pretty strongly here. And the outside chance that Alabama, say, loses early, Vanderbilt runs the table, wins the whole thing. Vanderbilt has the win over Alabama. That's all this is. But that's a minor thing compared to the first one. Anything you want to add on here, Cole?
Nope, nothing on this. I think it's pretty straightforward. We want Alabama to win a lot of games.
This next one's a big one. We want Gonzaga to lose in the conference title game. They only get to play 2 games this week. They're playing tonight, actually, I think, against Oregon State. I have confidence they'll win. If they lose, then that makes this easy for me. But they're probably going to play either St. Mary's or Santa Clara, most likely St. Mary's. St. Mary's did just beat Gonzaga less than a week ago. So this is going to be the biggest one, in my personal opinion, because if Gonzaga loses, their resume just does not compare to Alabama. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Gonzaga, I think the biggest thing about Gonzaga is that it's hard for them to really improve their resume. They're only going to get 1 more quadrant 1 opportunity, and even that's only potentially, although I think Santa Clara is good enough to where that would still be a quadrant 1 in the championship, even if they were to upset St. Mary's. And really, neither of those teams would be as impressive as a win over an Arkansas for sure, maybe even a Georgia on a neutral site. That's going to be a pretty comparable win there. So I think Gonzaga can't really boost their resume very much, but they can hurt it by losing another game.
Let's go to the next one. Next one, I believe, is we're looking at the Big 12 tournament. So we mentioned earlier that Iowa State is probably locked up a 3 seed. I don't think Iowa State is going to fall from a 3 seed. They also were a 1 seed in the early bracket reveal, so it's hard to drop that far, but Iowa State is in this position. They're a 5 seed. They're going to play the winner of Arizona State Baylor. They should be favored to win. Then they play Texas Tech. That is a key one, in my opinion. Texas Tech is sitting very close to that 4-3 line right behind Alabama. Texas Tech needs to lose. It needs to lose early. Losing to Iowa State is great. If they beat Iowa State, that even adds to their resume of impressive wins they have. You also look at the bottom of the bracket. You have Kansas. Kansas is close to Alabama right now. Very much a very similar resume to each other, metrics and everything. What you want from Kansas here, you want them to lose pretty early, win maximum 1 game. It looks like they're going to play TCU. TCU has gotten a lot better recently. I would definitely favor Kansas to win that game. But if Kansas is to win that game, you want them to lose to Houston. You don't want them to get further than to the championship game, because that's just as building and building and building their strong resume. So For this one, I have Iowa State beating Texas Tech and Kansas losing early to TCU or Houston. Is there anything else I missed on that one, Parker?
No, this is the realistic rooting guide, right? Because you assume that Iowa State or Texas Tech, one of them is guaranteed to get a win in some capacity. I don't think Iowa State's going to get bounced by Baylor or Arizona State, but I don't know. At this point, I think that either Iowa State or Texas Tech going on a run could be a bump, but who knows? If Iowa State gets beat bad enough by Texas Tech and then Texas Tech makes it far enough, I think that shakes things up way too much for my liking. I will say that.
Cole?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to point out on this, I agree with all this. I'm a little scared about Kansas just because they have the potential to play with everybody. They have maybe the best player in the country in Darren Peterson, and I think this bracket sets up pretty well for them. Also, if they were to potentially win this tournament, they would win this tournament on Saturday night, which I think is a big deal compared to winning it on Sunday, where the committee might not take that game into account. So Kansas scares me a little bit, but that's all I wanted to point out there.
No, that's a good point about the Sunday thing. We'll go to the Big Ten. Like I mentioned, I think Nebraska has solidified a 3 seed. I don't think Alabama's catching them, but the one thing Nebraska can do us a favor for is not letting Purdue pick up too many wins. Nebraska is right here as the 2 seed in the Big Ten, and they're matched up with Purdue. Purdue is the 7 seed. Purdue probably plays Indiana, who plays the winner of Northwestern Penn State. Indiana has beaten Purdue. Something to add in, if Indiana could pull off this upset, so in the realistic rooting guide, I have Purdue could just lose to Indiana again. If that's the best case scenario ever, and it's semi-realistic. But the most realistic is they beat Indiana, they're playing Nebraska, and Nebraska needs to beat Purdue. That's also going to be a big help for us. Now, like we mentioned, Purdue's a bunch of road warriors. They are just not playing good at home, which doesn't make any sense. They have Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren, Oscar Clough. 3 of those guys have been there for 4 years. And their senior day, they even lost to Wisconsin. Like, it's just something is off on Purdue. But maybe this is the tournament where everything clicks. It's March. Everything can flip of a switch. What do y'all think about Purdue recently? And what about this realistic rooting guide for this one? Parker.
I've made my thoughts on Purdue well known. I think that road warriors is a great way to put it. I think that they're just going to continue to dominate outside of their own arena, which is weird to say, but I don't know. I talked about that in a previous segment. I think that Indiana could do it, but I also think that Purdue could go up against Michigan crazy enough in the Big Ten Conference Finals. So either or. It could be anything. Anyone's guess, really.
Anything for you, Cole?
Nope, I agree. Purdue's maybe the most high variance team that we're talking about today. So they're a big one.
Alrighty, last one here with the ACC tournament. The main one we're looking at is Virginia. ACC is not really that strong this year. Duke probably may cruise through this whole thing. But the thing is with Virginia, they have potential to get 2 more wins to the resume, which could put them, I think, at 29 wins, which is impressive. Like their WOB, even their schedule's not impressive, but when you're winning that many games, your WOB score also reflects it. And they're almost at 7 WOB, a full 7 WOB. Alabama's at 7.5. So they're not too much separation there. Virginia is probably going to play Miami or Louisville. And your hope is, because I don't think Virginia's necessarily going to lose to NC State. I think they just played NC State and they beat them. Now, if NC State were to beat Virginia, that'd be awesome. But I'm going to be more realistic, and I'm going to say that they hopefully lose to either Louisville or Miami. I think, honestly, Louisville with Mikael Brown, I think he can be a lightning rod and go off in March. I feel like he's one of those guys that Cole mentioned, one of those guards that can just go off randomly in March. He's one of the best freshman guards in the country, which is saying something with, Kingston Flemings, Darius Acuff, and all these other great guards in college basketball right now. But this is the last team, Virginia. They rated Virginia above Alabama a few weeks ago. I think there's potential for it maybe to happen again. I think this is also, along with the Gonzaga one, this is probably the second most important one for things to go Alabama's way. I think this has to be one of those things. Do you agree, Cole?
Yeah, I agree. Virginia is one of our biggest competition, but they're kind of in a weird situation here because what scares me is that both of those potential games, both against NC State as well as against either Miami or Louisville, will technically be quadrant one, but they both feel very, very winnable. So there's a good chance Virginia is able to pick up 2 more quadrant one wins here, which does scare me. But they can also very easily lose both of those games. And in terms of why I like wins above bubble so much is that those games will be treated as lower end quadrant one games as opposed to just throwing them in the quadrant one category. So hopefully the WOB will keep us ahead of Virginia, even if they were to potentially win those first 2 games.
I agree. I think this is going to be one that we should keep a close eye on. I do think that ultimately Virginia is going to get snipped at some point in this tournament. I don't think that they're going to lift the cup. I don't think they're going to take off the net, but none of that's going to happen. How far do they get? The biggest thing is that whenever they do get cut off, they have the 74th ranked strength of schedule. That's such an important factor because, like Cole was talking about, even if these are quadrant one, quadrant two wins, if you lose 1 or 2, like you're not going to lose 2, obviously, but if you lose, like if you go 1-1 or if you go 2-1, I do think that will the loss will affect them so much more in rating than it would Alabama, because Alabama will lose to, say, a 1 seed and Virginia will lose to, say, a 1 seed, so that's a wash. But when you total those losses against the strength of schedule, the difference is night and day. 73 spots literally in strength of schedule difference when you compare those 2 losses, because that would be the 5th loss for Virginia, but their losses are Butler, Virginia Tech, and then North Carolina and Duke. So two really good losses, 2 really poor losses.
Yeah, and another thing, like Cole had mentioned with the Big 12 tournament, this tournament ends on Saturday. Alabama, the SEC and the Big Tens end on Sunday, but the ACC and the Big 12, they end on Saturday. So that's also another thing to consider here. Well, let us know how you feel about Alabama entering the NCAA tournament. Do you think they'll be a 3 seed? Do you think they'll be a 4 seed? And what does Alabama need to do this weekend to get on track? Well,
what do you guys think? Let's end with our thoughts. What do you guys think? Where do you think we wind up when it's all said and done? When the dust settles. Thomas, you go first.
We'll be a 3 seed. We'll be the number 12 overall seed, and we're going to be in Greenville, North Carolina, and I will be in attendance. Excuse me, Greenville, South Carolina. Sorry, it's late at night. Greenville, South Carolina. It's my bad. Sorry, North and South Carolina people, but Greenville, South Carolina, I will be there.
I will take the more pessimistic approach here. I think we're going to end up on the 4 line. I just think there's too many things that could go wrong this weekend. And I think we'll see how Alabama does, but I worry that because our games are so late in the day a lot of the times and so late in the week, I don't know if we're going to get as much credit for these potential wins as a lot of these other teams playing on Thursday and Friday morning might.
That's a phenomenal point. But that also applies to losses too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Alabama is going to Alabama's not going to change who they are, and they're not going to make a statement to the committee either way about who they are, unless they lose to Georgia or Texas again, which I don't think will happen, knock on wood. I think that Alabama ends up as a 4 seed too. I'm with Cole. I think that Purdue could get sneaky and somehow end up in that Big Ten championship game, and then the next thing you know, Alabama is that number 4 seed or the first of the 4 seeds. So that's where I think. If you think different, though, in the comments, let us know. Yell at us.
Yeah. So we have optimism, me, pessimism, those 2 jokers. Let them know in the comment section how you feel about Alabama going into the NCAA tournament. But until then, I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.